Hello there guys, today I'm going to teach you how to create a draw text script that will use a sprite that you have handmade. This will allow you to create your own custom fonts and display text on the screen with them in GameMaker. So let's get started. First thing you're going to need is a Sprite Font. You don't have to name it Sprite Font, obviously, but it must contain all the letters and all the numbers and all the symbols that you wish to display on the screen in your messages. So, for example, I have A to Z. I've only done capitals in this case because I just wanted to get this quick up and going. I didn't want to overcomplicate things. I've also done the numbers 1 to 9 and also 0. So 0 to 9. That would make more sense saying that. Anyway. Okay, that's good. So once you have that, you also want to create your script, which in this case I've called draw text. I also have implemented that in my object camera. So if I go to draw and then double click here, I have used it here. And as you can see, the way I've laid it out is I give it the X, the Y, the string that I want to print out, and also the sprite that it's going to use to draw the text. Good. So, I should explain quickly that this is a game that I'm working on for Halloween real quick. So that is what you are seeing when I test this. But the main thing is this draw text. Also, to understand this fully, you need to have a fair bit of knowledge on GameMaker. I'm going to be using most of the, well, not most of the advanced stuff, but a few advanced things that you will not know if you have not been using GameMaker for a while and delved fairly deep into GML. But don't worry if you don't understand it. You can just copy out this code and just use the script and barely understand it, and it will still work for you. You will still be able to display text. And also, finally, this time around, I am literally only going to draw text to the screen. I'm not going to animate it in any way, but that may be a future tutorial if you guys would like that. So, let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is declare some local variables for this script. I'm using underscores in the names just so that GameMaker doesn't get confused with its own built-in variables. The reason why I'm making these local to the script as well is so that, for example, the object camera will not inherit some random variables such as sprite and X and underscore Y that I don't want it to have, and that might cause conflicts. So let's go ahead, put these in. I'll explain them after I type them out, I guess. So just type out what I'm typing and then I'll give you an overview of what we're going to use them for. So there we go. That's all of them that I'm going to use in this function. First one is the sprite. So GameMaker stores this as an ID, but you can just think of it as me telling the script, I want to use this sprite. So we're going to pass in, for example, Sprite Font, and that will keep that stored in that variable. We have a font layout one, which I'm going to use in a bit. We're going to put in all of the... I'll get to that in a second. Jeez, can't talk today. X keeps track of the X coordinate where we're going to draw our text. Y keeps track of the Y coordinate where we're going to draw our text. String holds the string that we want to draw to the screen. I is going to be used in increment for the for loops. Normally I would create this beside the for loops, but since we're making local variables here, let's just use it here. So it stands for incrementer or whatever you want it to stand for. It's a standard programming thing to use I. Next, we have offset X, offset Y. These are going to keep tabs on where you are positioned and where you are drawing the next letter. Basically, where you're going to draw the next letter. That makes more sense. That is an easy way to say that. You'll gain a better understanding of that when we get to that in the code. So let's use our arguments that we're going to get passed into this function. So as you saw earlier, we're going to pass in the X, the Y, the string we want to output, and then the sprite. You could pass in more things if you want to complicate this further, or you could pass in less things, like you could not pass in the sprite and just go on the assumption that the user is always going to need the SPR font sprite. But in this case, this is what I've chosen. You feel free to customize this any way you like. is what I'm trying to say. That's not how you spell argument. So, string equals argument 2, and also sprite equals argument 3. Great. So we've gotten all the information passed into this function now. So now I'm going to tell you about the font layout, and I'm not going to mess it up like a putz. So if we take a look at my Sprite font that I made earlier, you can see the letters A to Z and then the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0. You need to replicate exactly how this is laid out in a string. So let me give you an example. So in my sprite, it goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. And then in my sprite, it goes all the way up to 9, and then it goes to 0. So as you can see, my well, that's in the way. Get out my face, dog. As you can see, this relates directly to the positioning of each sub-image in my sprite. That's what you want to do. You want to replicate exactly what is in your sprite in the exact order. This must be in perfect order. There can't be any spaces, and you need to put in all your symbols as well. So for example, if you had symbols at the end, you would put them in over here. I've not done symbols, but I recommend you do symbols if you're going to use this for anything very serious. Cool. So now that we have our font layout, we need to translate that into kind of a map that the function can reference later on. We could just use the font layout and search all the way through the font layout for every single letter, but that would be way slower than the method I am about to show you. This method is a little bit more complicated, but it does have far better results. So we're going to start this out with an if, and if a variable global exists. So we're going to check if we have already created a car map, because if we have, we don't need to make this map again. Right, so now this is a one-time thing. Only the very first time that we run draw text will it go through this, because we're about to create car map. And what the car map does is it is a list of all the different ASCII values, so all the different values for all the different letters, and for each ASCII value it has a number stored, and that number is the sub-image in your sprite. Now don't worry if you don't understand this is quite complex to grasp just at first, so I'll go ahead and program it. I will go over it one last time, but this will take some looking through from you and some understanding on your end. So first thing I'm going to do is set everything equal to a kind of default number, so that if we for example, our string does contain a exclamation mark and I haven't added an exclamation mark to this font layout, it won't panic and say, oh no, this has not been made, this has not been set to any value. We're going to set it to a default value of -1, so that we know if it's value -1, then that letter does not exist in our font, and then we will deal with that accordingly. So as I said, it will go through every single number, from 0 to 255 and set it equal to -1. The reason why it's 0 to 255 is because that is how many values ASCII allows you to display. Each car can only be anything from 0 to 255. Alright, onwards. So that just covers our butts, basically, if something goes wrong. Righto! Now we're going to actually translate each of the letters in this font layout into the car map. We're going to look at each one and make a reference to where it is, so the GameMaker will remember, and you can later reference it when you're drawing each letter. So from I equals 1, I is less than or equal to, string length font layout, and then we're gonna add 1 each time we go through and increment through. Actually, I'm not gonna need brackets for this. This does not concern you, brackets. So let's do what I wanted to do. Let's go global car map. And then I'm going to put this in here because what is going to be contained in here is slightly complicated. So we'll come back to that in a moment. Set it to I. So it will go through every single letter in the font layout and set it to its position in the font layout. Each element of car map. So we need to tell it, we need to put in here, in these boxes, the key is going to be the ASCII value of the letter at that position in the font layout. So to do this, GameMaker has a nice little function that will return the ASCII value of the first letter in a string. In this case, we're just going to separate out the one character that we want from font layout, and that is the character at the position of I. Okay? Complicated, I know, and probably you won't get this at first. If you do get this, then good, you are fairly advanced in your GameMaker usage. So now we have a car map that will only be set up the very first time that you draw text, and it will go through every letter in your font layout and give it its, well, it will store its ASCII value and the position that it is in the Sprite Font sprite. Yes, that is as simple as I can make that. I apologize that it sounds ridiculous. So, now let's set our offset X and offset Y to 0, because that's where the first letter is going to be displayed. And we're going to go start another for loop. Also, one thing I should mention just real quick, the reason why I go from I equals 1 to the full length of string length rather than, for example, I equals 0 and I is just less than string length, is because string character at this function goes from 1 to the end number rather than 0 to the end number, if that makes sense. This is kind of unusual. I don't know, it's something that will come up a little bit later, and I'll talk about it again later when that happens, but just know you have to go from 1 instead of from 0. You could go from 0, wouldn't cause you any problems, I don't think, in this location, but it's best to go from 1 because that's all the data that there is. If it goes from 0, it's just going to return something garbage, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, again, for I equals 0 to I is less than equal to string length, and as you can see, we're going to be using another string car at function because we're going from 1 to less than or equal to, and then we're going to go string I plus equals 1. So we're basically just going to loop through every single letter in our string that we want to draw to the screen. Next, I'm going to make another temporary variable. The reason why I'm doing, well, let's first type it out and then I'll tell you the reason why I'm storing it in its own thing. So, we're going to get the ASCII value of string car at, and we're going to use the string I. So this is just going to give us our ASCII value of the letter that we're currently about to draw. And the reason why I'm storing this in a separate variable is because we're going to use it twice, and it will make our lines of code a bit shorter and also use less CPU because it only has to execute this once. It will use more memory, but we have an abundance of memory right now. This is not going to be huge impact stuff. So if global.carMap_C, so if the ASCII value for the current letter we're about to draw does not equal -1, so if we have in fact given this its own specific number over here and it hasn't just been left as the default -1, then we're going to draw the letter. Otherwise, we're not going to bother drawing the letter because we do not have that letter. Again, I've added brackets, but I really don't need them. You can add brackets if you prefer that for readability. Feel free to add any white space that you want and customize as you feel necessary. So, for each letter, we're going to loop through each letter, we're going to get its ASCII value, and then we're going to check that we do have a reference for that, and then we're just going to go ahead and draw it. So we're using the sprite that we passed in earlier as our sprite, and the sub image is going to be that we're going to reference that car map that we made earlier. Now here's where that thing comes in earlier that I said 1 to the max value rather than 0 to the max value minus 1. We're going to have to take off 1 here, just because of the ways that a sprite, when you each of the sub images in a sprite, it goes from 0 to the max number rather than 1 to the max number, if that makes sense. Whereas the string char at uses 1 to the max number. Yeah, that kind of makes sense, I hope. So, the position that we're going to draw the character at is our x plus our x offset, because remember that's where we're going to draw the next letter. So the x is where the string's going to go, and the x offset is where the letter is going to go. And we're going to do the same thing for y. Excellent. And I'm putting in semicolons here. You don't have to put semicolons. You do need semicolons in a for loop, I believe. But other than that, you don't have to feel it necessary to put in those semicolons. Alright, so now that we've drawn a letter, every time we draw a letter, we want to push the x offset on 1. Because remember, this is where our next character is going to go. If we don't do this, then all the characters are just going to draw on top of each other. So I'm going to add on the width of the sprite that we're using as our font. You don't have to do that. You could just manually put in something. If you know all your letters are going to be 32, but your sprite is not necessarily 32 wide, then you can do that. But in this case, I'm going to actually get the information from the sprite itself. Q. Now, finally, if our string char at string, current iteration is equal to a hash sign, then we're going to treat it as a new line. The reason why I picked hash sign is just because that is GameMaker standard. If you use any other kind of display text in GameMaker, it uses the hash sign as the new line symbol. You could use any symbol you want, however. If you want to use the hash symbol for other things, if you want that in your font, for example, then you can use any symbol you want. You could also make it slightly more complicated and make that into a /n. However, I'm not going to be covering that in this tutorial. Maybe another tutorial if you guys would like that. Okay, final bit, 2 lines. So if we are taking a new line, if the character is a new line character, then we need to set the x offset back to 0. Because remember, whenever you're filling out text, if you hit enter, then you've gone all the way back to 0. But you've also pushed the cursor down 1. So let's push our cursor down 1. So offset y plus equals sprite get height, and sprite. So the height of the sprite is moving it down 1. Okay, let's just test this works. I probably I made a typo somewhere, so let's just check. Nope, in fact, I have not. So, excellent, worked first time. There's our first line, there's our second line. I'll just go to my camera object so you can see exactly what I entered in. This is a test 1, 2, 3. And then I use the hash, which takes a new line. This is a new line. Now remember, this is case sensitive. So if I was to make this capital T and run it up, it just does not draw that T, because in our font layout, we've only specified lowercase characters. So that allows you the option to also add capitals. But if you know you're only going to be using a single case, like lowercase or uppercase, you may want to translate your string in that way. So you may want to do a string lower on the user's input. This will make sure that it's permanently lowercase, allowing you to add in capitals, and you now have your T back. Excellent. So, quick rundown of what we've done, and then I will say my goodbyes. If you have gotten everything you wanted out of this tutorial, then you are free to turn it off. Thanks for watching. So we created our local variables. We got the input from the function arguments. So the XY positions the string that the user wants to print out, the sprite. We made a font layout, which is just an exact replica of the order that the letters are in the sprite that we're going to be using as our font. We went ahead and set up a car map that just has every single letter in the sprite has its ASCII value and also the sub-image location of that letter. So we can put in a ASCII value into our array and get out a sub-image that will directly relate to our sprite. Next, we set our offset y and offset x to 0 because that's the location of the next letter. And we go ahead and loop through every single letter in our string, getting our char value, our ASCII value for each letter, and checking that that ASCII value first exists in the char map. And then if it does, then we draw our letter using our char map as a reference for the sub-image. We then push our x over because that's where the next letter is going to be, and if there is a new line character, then we push the x back down to 0 but add one letter height to the offset y. Okay guys, hopefully that made sense. That is gonna do it for today. If you want any further information on drawing text using a sprite in GameMaker, go ahead and give me a message. If you have a better way of doing it, go ahead and comment is probably the best way to do it actually. And if you have any questions, then go ahead and comment. All those things, fantastic. One thing, finally, I want to clarify. Also, you could have just put this sprite in the orders that it laid out this sprite with the sub-images applying to each of the 255 ASCII codes. That would have worked far easier, but I want a much more flexible system. I don't want to be storing blank letters for letters that I don't need. Yes. So, that'll do it. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time when we'll probably learn something else.